From The Atlantic, my friends, the Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans. So says Jeffrey Goldberg. What a story indeed. They say, the world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 15th, the U.S. was bombing Houthi targets in Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew this is that Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons, packages, targets, and timing. Now, of course, Pete Hegseth says, nah. He stunningly denies that war plans were leaked to a highly discredited journalist who dropped a bombshell report. I feel like this is fake. Let me show you why first. The story technically begins short after the Hamas invasion of southern Gaza. Okay, blah, blah, blah. On Tuesday, March 11th, I received a connection request for a signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz. Signal is an open source encrypted messaging service popular with journalists. We understand. I assumed that the Michael Waltz in question was Trump's national security advisor. I did not assume, however, the request is from the actual Michael Waltz. I met him in the past, and though I didn't find it particularly strange that he might be reaching out to me, I did think it's somewhat unusual given the Trump admin's contentious relationship with journalists. I accepted the request. 2 days later, Thursday, 4:28 p.m., I received a notice that I was to be included in a Signal chat group called Houthi PC Small Group. Message to the group from Michael Waltz read as follows. Team establishing a principals group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for the next 72 hours. My deputy Alex Wong is pulling together a Tiger team at deputies agency chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the sit room this morning for action items, and I will be sending that out later this evening. The message included, please provide the best staff POC from your team for us to coordinate over the next couple of days in the weekend. The term Principals Committee generally refers to the group of the senior most national security officials, including the Secretary of Defense, State, and the Treasury, as well as the Director of the CIA. Should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, I have never been invited to the White House Principals Committee meeting, and that many of the years of my reporting on national security matters, I had never heard of one being convened over a commercial messaging app. At this point, guy, 2 hours before the attack, and being texted the stuff, did it not occur to you that it's fake? I guess he says it did, but he still publishes the story, believing it to be real.
Surprised he didn't warn Yemen.
So blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the actual messages. March 14th, Michael Waltz texted the group, team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes. State of DOD, blah, blah, blah. At this point, a fascinating poly discussion commenced. The account labeled JD Vance said, team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. The Vance account goes on to state, 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez. 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message. The Vance account then goes on to make a noteworthy statement, considering that the vice president has not deviated publicly from Trump's position. I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep those concerns to myself, but there's a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. A person identified as Joe Kent wrote, there's nothing time sensitive driving the timeline. We'll have the exact same options in a month. Now it goes on. I'm not going to keep reading this. Pete Hegseth says, VP, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out. I think the messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on Biden failed and Iran funded. He goes on to say more and more about this. So they go on to mention that a spokesperson says that it appears to be a legitimate conversation, right? All right, let me just give you my quick assessment before we jump into the conversation. Otherwise, I'm going to read for 20 years all of these messages. Here you have the vice president, seemingly, talking with the Department of Defense, seemingly saying, what do we do? Nobody knows who the Houthis are. How do we inform the public as to who they are and why they're so bad? And that this really does matter to America. Are you kidding me? Well, I would include a journalist in the text message and then create scripted crap to be like, the Houthis are bad, because the moron's going to be like, whoa, they texted me. Guys, look, the Houthis. So Donald Trump took a hit on the bombing of Yemen. People were sharing the interview I did with Trump where he said, you don't need to do this. A lot of people said it was inconsistent. And then all of a sudden, this journalist is like, look at this perfect script of a JD Vance saying, I don't think it's a good idea. And Hegseth saying, you might be right, but we need to send a message. The president thinks it's the right thing to do. Oh, come on. Do you guys think this was an accident?
It's an accident on purpose.
Right.
They sent it. He took the bait.
Okay.
He ran with it.
Maybe it was.
I mean, look,
I don't know.
I don't have any sense as to whether or not it is or isn't an accident. The idea you laid out is completely plausible. It's also completely plausible that, someone had that dude's name in his phone and they put by the initials and they put the wrong initials in. That's plausible as well. And
Maybe. But he literally says they don't. The journalist says they don't do these meetings over commercial phone apps.
like I said, I have no sense as to whether or not it does. Maybe they, it could. I completely think that people make dumb mistakes, so it could be that they made
Especially
a dumb
in
mistake.
government.
But until I see what was ostensibly top secret information that was sent, until you actually show me that, this is a nothing burger.
Wait.
It's a PR stunt.
Look at this. Look at this message. It's like, as I heard it, the president was clear, green light, but we soon make it clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. E.g., if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. Everybody listening, I'm going to go ahead and say I believe strongly that this was intended to trick the journalist into publishing this message. The messages are scripted. The DOD does not green light 2 hours in advance strikes on a foreign country like this. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I'm willing to bet that considering the meetings I've been in and how slow everything is, bro, I can't install chicken wire in an hour. I can't install chicken wire in 1 hour. If I want chicken wire put up, I got to make like 3 phone calls and then complain why it's not getting done. And you think the government is just like, let's have a debate real quick over whether or not I'm going to press the button and fire the missiles from our destroyers off the coast of Yemen.
I mean, look,
Easier to bomb Yemen than chicken wire.
DOD Rapid Response has a clip of Hegseth on Fox News saying that you're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist. So I mean, look, they're denying that it's true.
How
Look,
much
again?
you want? One more thing.
Yeah.
What if some morbidly obese guy covered in Cheeto dust was sitting in his living room watching Fox News, eating Flamin' Hots, because they're awesome, by the way, and then decided to text this guy and hoax him?
Well,
and he
look,
believed it.
Someone just hoaxed Kanye, thinking it was Joe Rogan, and he tweeted
Oh,
about
really?
it, and Joe Rogan was like, "That's not me."
Whoa.
So those do happen. That was last week or 2 weeks.
So there's a few different theories on this. Tim, will you go to the part of the story where the National Security Council responds? This one, I think, gives your theory a lot of credibility. If you are in this position, you deny, right? You just deny, or you don't respond for comment. You don't like. Hegseth is now denying in front of the media. But here's what this spokesperson says. This appears to be an authentic message chain, and we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain. The thread is a demonstration of the deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. The ongoing success of the Houthi operation demonstrates that there were no threats to troops or national security. Hilarious to me. I think there's a few different theories. So one is like just complete BS. The guy eating Cheetos on the couch has duped this journalist with his buddies. One would be super metal if that was the case. The second theory is that this is some sort of concocted, not real, either AI or staffers pretending to have a high-level policy conversation with this journalist in a chat to promulgate that narrative.
I think it's scripted.
And then the third, or scripted. And then the third one is that it's real. You mentioned, if you don't show me the goods, I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah.
So this is about a military operation that has already happened. And so if that is the case, lawyers, the Atlantic has an army of lawyers to make sure that they can continue to destroy regular American people's lives on a regular basis and win in the courts. They should be able to have some sort of review to redact or include important information, but the screenshots that they include are just of this, what did they say? Deep and thoughtful policy coordination between senior officials. They could have had some sort of legal redaction,
Essentially,
right?
he said that they were waiting, or they didn't produce this. They didn't release this until after the attack or whatever had happened, right? So then why is there no information coming out. Exactly.
Right. There should be some sort of redactions available to show that you actually had some evidence of prior knowledge of a strike.
Already happened, yeah.
Right.
Why are they having the debate literally 2 hours before bombing Yemen?
Yeah.
Wouldn't they have met in D.C. and then actually confirmed their plans in person? This makes literally no sense. Why is the vice president texting the Secretary of Defense his opinion on a strike they're prepared to carry out in a couple of hours?
Yeah.
Unless their real consideration was Trump was the anti-war president who said we can't bomb these countries, and now we're planning on doing it. How do we get this narrative out there? Mm-hmm. How about, like, what if we release a statement, no one's going to buy it? But it's that meme where the Babylon Bee wrote that story. Ingenious move. Donald Trump comes out in support of impeachment, forcing Democrats to oppose. Whoops, we've accidentally revealed our true plans. Yeah. And it was a deep and thoughtful conversation about the collateral damage potentials, threats to our troops, the purpose behind the strike, and who the Houthis are. Mm-hmm. And now the American people's heard it all. Great. And all these liberals are laughing, being like, they're so dumb.
Right. It's like they don't care that their enemies, or their perceived enemies, will look at them as incompetent through this. They just wanted the story out. If it is the case that it was planted in this journalist.
Well, it could be a coalition. So, like, I think one area where the President Trump and his administration has received a lot of pressure is on the more restraint-oriented side of the right so far, with people like Mike Waltz being national security advisor. And so they go through with strikes on Houthis, and that has been a major issue for the restraint-oriented right. Like, why are we involved in Yemen at all? And so if you want to shore up that side of your coalition, you put something out there like you could put something out there like this that says, hey, that Vice President J.D. Vance, who the restraint community liked a lot, is advocating behind the scenes for the restraint position, and that is being received kindly by people like John Ratcliffe, like by people like, and Joe Kent's inclusion, that was interesting too. Oh, yeah. Like, Joe Kent was a big figure in this community when he didn't win his congressional runs. That was a bummer. And to see him get picked for the administration, that was a big deal for some people. Mm-hmm. So, JD in there, Joe Kent in there in this decision-making process, even when everyone seems kind of leagues higher than his administration position, and Hegseth, who has some credibility problems with the restraint community, coming in and saying, I totally get where you're coming from, JD. That could be the play, right? It's a coalition play for the own administration, because there was a New York Times piece like maybe it was a week ago about how people inside the administration are apparently calling the National Security Council the neoconservative Security Council. I don't know. Could be a motive. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything definitive, but that could be a motive.
They didn't give us strong messaging on the strikes against the Houthis in Yemen, and there was a backlash against it with a lot of people on the right saying bad. Now, all of a sudden, this guy leaks a message where you look at it and you're like, oh, I understand their justification. They're concerned about trade through Europe. They don't want to bail Europe out. They want to send a message to the Houthis. The Houthis are this terroristic group that are striking these ships. Now they've created a story where regular people will be exposed to it, and it's headline news everywhere. Every major outlet is talking about this.
Yeah. And like what Bradley's saying, the first things I saw in this story broke was people saying Vance is the most American first there.
Yep.
Like, it's part of the PR quality to it.
I think about Donald Trump being a master manipulator of the media. Famously, in his 2016 campaign run, he got $5 billion worth of free press by gaming the media into constantly talking about him. And they made money from it too, so it was win-win. But that's how Trump dominated the airwaves with a minimal budget compared to the rest of these candidates. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.